when I was in prison, I realized I was going to be almost 50 when I got released if I did survive my time. And starting a career at almost 50 with a serious criminal record and no money. And actually, I was going to be in debt because the IRS had charged, assessments against me. That was going to not be easy, and I really needed to just train myself for 14 years, which I did. And I feel very fortunate that since I've been out, I've had nothing but opportunities to serve and have a really amazing life.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who is out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode. Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. My guest today is Fleet Maul, PhD. We're going to be talking about the radical responsibility empowerment model, which he has developed, and how he transformed during his 14 years in prison and after. But first, I would like to invite you to visit my website, theexplodinghuman.com. Over there, you can listen to episodes, read synopses on my guests, see photos of the guests, little bio on myself. There's a donate button if you'd like to support the show through Patreon. Thank you very much. There's also a YouTube channel where you can listen, The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman, and The Exploding Human Facebook page. As I mentioned, my guest today is Dr. Fleet Maul. Fleet is a Zen master. Fleet has developed a model of empowerment called radical responsibility, which we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about meditation. We're going to talk about how he created the first prison hospice program and the benefits that has brought to prisons all across the country, and the summits that he holds through his Heart-Mind Institute, which brings all kinds of fabulous information to people for free. And I must say, Fleet has accomplished quite a bit, and it's particularly impressive since he spent so many years incarcerated. I'm going to stop talking now, and we are going to talk together. This is Fleet Maul. So glad you're here this morning. Why don't we start with who you are and what you do, and then we're going to take it from there. So you can explain yourself better than I can, I'm sure. And your hair looks great today, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Bob. Well, I'm a baby boomer. I came of age in the 60s, and I went through the whole counterculture revolution. I was kind of a sitting duck for that. Came through adolescence with a big hole in my gut, trying to fill that with anything and everything, and kind of classic angry young man. And then went headlong into the counterculture. But I was always a spiritual seeker. I'm not sure why, but I always was. And so I had this kind of dual major, if you will, for a long time in my life that kept me on that course of being a spiritual seeker, but also got me involved in a lot of the craziness of that era. And tending to be a bit of an extremist, I took a lot of that to the extreme. Along the way, I got very deeply involved in the Buddhist path and training and mindfulness and awareness, and really being trained as a teacher as well. But I had this shadow side that I kept secret from my teacher and community. And I'd ended up in South America after my undergraduate years, just as living as an expat. I kind of, at some point I just had to leave the country. And it was actually when Richard Nixon was reelected, I just kind of had to get out, and I was looking for something real. I was trying to get away from where I was. And I ended up living in South America for quite a while, traveled around a lot, but in Peru in particular, and fell into small scale drug trafficking as a way to just live outside the system, and justified it with all this us versus them thinking. And so that kind of shadow followed me for a long time, even when I went back to school and got my master's degree, and I ended up getting deeply involved in a Buddhist path. I still had this shadow life going on, and I kind of self-medicated around the cognitive dissonance and so on, and till I knew I had to get out of it and untangle it somehow. But before I managed to do that, I earned my way into what ended up being a 14 and a half year federal prison sentence for drug trafficking. I was originally sentenced to a 30-year no parole sentence, and pretty much thought my life was over. I was 35 at the time. The paper next morning said I'd be 65 before I had any chance of release. And my son was 9 years old at the time, and that was just absolutely devastating to finally wake up and realize how I'd been putting his life at risk all these years, and the impact that my craziness was now going to have on him growing up without a dad. Fortunately, after my appeal went to the courts, that took 2.5 years. They knocked off one charge, so that reduced it from my aggregate sentence from 35 to 25. And under the old federal law, if you stayed out of trouble, you earned a lot of good time. So since I was sentenced prior to 1987, I ended up serving 14 and a half on 25 by staying out of trouble. If I'd been sentenced after 87, on 25, I would have had to serve about 22 minimally. So things have gotten much worse for people who are sentenced today in the federal system. At any rate, it was a huge wake-up call for me when that happened, and it's sad that it took that to wake me up, but it did. And so I became radically dedicated to getting all the negativity out of my life and to doing something positive with my life, making a contribution, wanting to leave a better legacy for my son than just his dad went to prison or even his dad died in prison, because I had no surety that I would survive that time. I did my time in a maximum security federal prison hospital in Springfield, Missouri. Very intense place with 600 medical patients, 400 psychiatric patients, and then about 300 what they call general population or work cadre inmates that were there to help run the place. And I was one of those. I ended up being a school teacher for 14 years, was my day job. And, but other inmates would work in the kitchen or housekeeping or carpentry or welding shop or up in the hospital as orderlies. And so I just became radically dedicated to transforming life there, to building my life around the basic ethical principles of the Buddhist path, which I've been ignoring. I've been focused on the awareness and the mind part and ignoring the ethical principles, the precepts of the Buddhist path, and just getting all the negativity out of my life and taking what I've been given by my family and my teachers and other influences and doing something positive with it. So I lived this life of 14 years of literally, I took monastic vows. I was a prison monk, had this very disciplined life, from getting up early in the morning to do various meditation and contemplative practices, working all day, helped start the first hospice program in a prison anywhere in the world, spent most of my meal breaks and evenings and a lot of my weekend time being with men who were dying up in the hospital, involved in my own recovery from alcohol and substance abuse and 12-step programming, and I became kind of the backbone of that program for 14 years. Because other people came and went a lot. This was a very transient facility. Most of the general population prisons were there a year to 18 months at most. I was there for 14 years, so people were coming and going. And I started a meditation group in a chapel that I facilitated twice a week. So I kept myself very disciplined, but also got in good shape, took good care of myself. And, once we had to be locked down at night at 9 o'clock, then I was in my cell and studying 2 or 3 hours a night and then practicing another hour or two and going to bed. Originally, I was sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night, probably for the first 10 hours of I don't know how I did it back then. I couldn't do it now, but I was on fire for change and I was leading a very disciplined life. So maybe I needed less sleep, but at any rate, that's what I did. And so that time in prison ended up being an incredibly transformative and healing and transformative journey for me. But it's important to point out, which I always do, that I was lucky. I came in with a lot of resources and a lot of preparation. And once that wake-up call happened, it was really clear to me that I needed to embrace having got myself into this place and what I was going to do with my time there, and also motivated to make a contribution to that place just because of the background of my family values and my spiritual teachers' values. But for most prisoners, it's actually an incredibly debilitating, harmful journey. Most people come out of prison. Yeah. So who am I? What do I do? All right. The right mix of things for me to really radically change my life and turn my life around. And I got out in 1999. So that's something like 23 years ago. And I've had nothing but opportunity ever since to travel the world and serve. And I continue to do work in the criminal justice system. And I do all kinds of work kind of area of personal evolution, human potential. I'm a business consultant and teacher and so forth. But it really, I think all of that was created by that very dedicated time when I was in prison. I realized I was going to be almost 50 when I got released if I didn't survive my time, and starting a life, a career at almost 50 with a serious criminal record and no money. And actually, I was going to be in debt because the IRS had charged, assessments against me. That was going to not be easy, and I really needed to just train myself for 14 years, which I did. And I feel very fortunate that since I've been out, I've had nothing but opportunities to serve and have a really amazing life. So that's the short version of the story.
It's short and amazing. Oh my gosh. It's I'm fascinated even for myself when you talk about the shadow side. I've had periods of time, particularly, a long time ago, that when I was younger also, where I was drawn to some of the darker types of ways of being in the world. And I guess negativity would be the word. And there is an allure to that. I could never really understand what that was for me and how, to consistently do things that don't serve me. And I've done, quite a bit of sort of thought about it, and haven't really come up with, anything other than just, that's what I wanted to do. I could go to family of origin and, all that kind of stuff, but it really, my sister grew up in the same house. She didn't want to do any of that stuff. So what do you think that is? I'm fascinated. I mean, what do the Buddhists say about that? I think we all have that. We have a dark light, shadow light side. I find that just fascinating.
Yeah, well, the shadow, properly understood, is not necessarily dark. It's dark because it's unacknowledged, right, and hidden. Actually, it can include a lot of richness, and the world of literature has been exploring the shadow forever. It's where all the juicy and rich stuff is in life. But in terms of our own individual lives, it's all the disowned parts of ourselves that have been repressed and unacknowledged and denied, really because of adverse childhood experiences that we all go through. Nobody comes through childhood unscathed. In Buddhist terms, there is the idea of karma. So there can be, you see children come, like in your case, come through the same family of origin with very different results. So that could have something, in a Buddhist understanding of life, could have something to do with past life karma. But, even within a family, even without, speculating about that, just being in a different order in a family, different influences, the same family environment, the difference in ages, difference in the kind of sibling pecking order and things can create very different results. My family of origin, a good, Midwestern Roman Catholic family with good values. My father, a good provider, all of that, but alcoholism in the family. My mother was an episodic alcoholic. You never knew when you come home, she might be just smiling, wonderful mother, or suddenly she was drunk, crazy, rageaholic, alcoholic mother, and incredibly scary. So it's this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. And when you're young, that really completely splits you, and so, all my siblings, I had an older brother and 3 younger sisters, we all have our manifestations of it. I mean, I took it into going deep into the counterculture and everything I did with it, but the rest of them have suffered, in more conventional ways with it. I mean, we're all fine today, but everybody got their dose of it, right? Yeah. And so we all deal with it, and we all have this stuff that runs our lives until we make it visible to ourselves and do the work of healing it and integrating it. The shadow stuff, it's not about bad stuff in it. It's just unacknowledged stuff that we need to allow come to the surface, acknowledge it, befriend it, do the work of healing it, and then integrate it and into really becoming who we are. It's not even really about getting rid of stuff. It's more about integration. And so, how that plays out, it's also most of the modern systems of psychology and psychotherapy look at what we generally refer to as me or I, this idea of a self that we have, that it's actually a multiplicity of I's and selves. I mean, even Jungian terms, you had the id, the ego, and the superego. transactional analysis, you have parent, adult, child. But in your more modern systems like internal family systems and others, there's multiplicity of parts, or voice dialogue. And we actually have, scores, you could even say hundreds of parts and subparts, and they all like different voices in us. And they all have their own energy. And really the work of integration is about really doing the work to make all of this more transparent to ourselves and embrace and integrate and heal, so that we can, because that part of ourselves that can see it all, acknowledge it all, befriend it all, do the work of healing it, that part is what you might call, some might call the higher self or the depth of our being, but it has natural qualities of integration and compassion and wisdom and equanimity and so forth. Whereas when we get pulled into it, our life is getting run by one of these parts, or another part that's, kind of playing the sabotage role or playing the rescue role, that gets us caught up in all this drama and confusion, and it's all operating in an unconscious way until we do the work to make it conscious. So we're very complex beings, and it's really about the work of self-awareness and self-healing, and that's a lifelong journey.
Yeah, boy, you are very articulate, and I appreciate that, because you and I have a lot of similarities. What I was very, I'm probably, I don't know, I'm 68. You're probably close to my age. But
72.
72. Yeah. So we, that sort of, I always called myself a tail end hippie. I got there sort of a little late, but I wanted that whole counterculture thing. I was too young to go to Woodstock, but I wanted to, I was like 14 or 15. And, that idea of, being different and than the establishment and us versus them that you were talking about was really a part of the way that I operated for a long time. And that belief system about who I was, that identity, that character I adapted it wasn't really me. It was just something that was a convenient survival tool. It made me feel like I belonged to something bigger, that I had a little bit more of a purpose than maybe what I would call civilians. And the cheap way of expanding my consciousness, the easy way, the flipping a switch, doing psychedelics and weed and all that stuff, which I was on that a somewhat of a spiritual journey, except when it didn't work because I was not doing the things that I do now, I just went, I'll just keep the drug part and get rid of anything else. I'm kind of rambling here, but I just feel like he's kind of opened up for me to talk about a little bit of the way I thought, which seems very similar to you.
Yeah. And, it was a reaction to the times, and I don't, I regret any of the harm that I caused in the world, any harm that I had on others through my involvement with drugs. I deeply regret that. I certainly deeply regret the impact all my choices had on my son.
Yeah.
But I don't fundamentally regret the journey, because, there could have been more creative ways I could have responded to the hypocrisies and what didn't make sense in the era that I grew up in, the 1950s and 60s, this very repressed culture coming out of my parents' generation, the World War II and Depression generation. And so it was actually, the counterculture was actually very intelligent. It was a very intelligent response to all that, but it went awry, went awry in many ways. And part of that was that, my parents' generation, the way they were raised and the way they were raising, people like me, baby boomer children, was not to think for ourselves unless you had really rare parents. It was to be, to follow, to conform, to follow, get into this mainstream conformity. And if you do, you'll be a winner. If you don't, you're going to fail. That was a basic message. And I was not trained to think for myself or to figure it out for myself. And so when those of us in that counterculture era just kind of decided to throw the rule book out and reject the whole thing, whole cloth, and step into the world, of course, we made a big mess of things. But I don't think it was unintelligent to take the leap to begin with, because the world we're in was incredibly repressive and stuck and full of all kinds of structural problems that we're still not free of today. But there were a lot of liberation movements that came out of that, and a lot of the process we're still in to create a fair world for everybody and have a more liberated world and less structuralized oppression and prejudice and racism and all the rest of it impacting people. That a lot of that began in that era. So I wish I had found more creative ways to respond to all of that, other than end up becoming involved in drug smuggling. But it'd been better if I'd wrote a great hippie novel or something. But instead, that's the direction my path took me in. But I'm grateful that I did find my way to turning my life around, and really that's informed my life ever since. That my kind of core principle in the name of my book I call radical responsibility, and that was really the thing that became really obvious to me the minute I got to federal prison. Was I was in this incredibly negative world, and if I didn't proactively do something about it, I'd end up negative, bitter, broken, myself. And so I realized that I had to take 100%, even 200% responsibility, having got myself into that situation, what I was going to do with it, and where my life would take me if I was lucky enough to survive it. So, that's where my basic philosophy of life began, of really, voluntarily embracing 100% ownership for each and every circumstance I face in life, including the ones that I can see I had some role in creating, or at least allowing, and even the ones I can't see I had any relationship to at all. Because at some point the salient question is, even if something, has befallen me that everyone would agree I had nothing to do with, and, it just landed on my head, but still at some point the salient question is, what am I going to do with it? Am I going to let it take me down? Or am I going to find the most creative way I can respond to it to move my life forward? Right. So that's this idea of radical ownership, radical responsibility. And it has really served me well. I was able to create 2 national organizations while I was in prison, which you're not supposed to be able to do, that are still impacting the world. And I've had an amazing life ever since I got out. And it's really always been based on, and it's an ongoing journey every day, because, part of the mind wants to always slip into that victim mindset, and feel like life is happening to me and this and that and that. And, like anyone else, I have to continually remind myself, get back in the driver's seat. What can I do? How can I embrace this? How can I work with this? Right? Get out of the drama and back into creative solution-based thinking. And so living my life in that way has really served me well. And it's allowed me to, I think, I have the opportunities to contribute to life.
That's such a fantastic concept. The name of your book, Radical Responsibility. That's got everything in it for life success, and those 2 words, in my opinion. And the idea of taking responsibility is, it's work, it's discipline, and it's consistency. And I think that's the thing that's helped me the most, is to be able to do those things. Whereas I didn't, I have a friend that goes, why can't life just come to you easy? Because it doesn't. It's just the way it is. And, this idea of service, because I want to get to that, because you're starting a hospice in a prison and being of service to other people, that never crossed my mind. That it wasn't that I didn't want to do it. It just didn't even occur to me. It was never taught to me. I guess it was sort of this amorphous kind of concept that, other people did. It just wasn't in my worldview at all to help somebody else. And somebody said to me once, which I thought was the most amazing thing, is anytime you're not thinking about yourself, it's a spiritual experience, because you can't be self-absorbed and in self-pity and in victimhood when you're outside yourself helping somebody else. You can't do it. It's impossible.
And to this day, I feel, I think everything I did in prison, I was really deeply involved in my meditative practices and training from the Buddhist tradition, the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. I was doing a 12-step work. I was doing a lot to work on myself, studying very deeply. And but I still feel one of the most transformative things was being involved in that hospice care, because the power of, being with someone else where your full attention is focused on them and their needs, and you're able to kind of, in a healthy way, set your own needs aside for the moment to just really focus on that person who's really in a tough spot, someone who's dying in prison, right? it's just the most transformative experience. And you're right. I think it was St. Paul who said maybe if you want to be happy, forget about yourself or something. It's that self-absorption. And again, this is one of the catch-22s of life, and that was one of the things about the counterculture movement. Like you, when I was involved, I wasn't really thinking about service. I mean, we thought we had this, especially in the original kind of psychedelic era of the hippie era before things started getting dark and heavy. But originally we thought we were all part of this new community and we all kind of supported each other and helped each other. And, but it wasn't really service in any sense. It was just being part of some kind of affinity club around the shared set of rebellious values. And there was a lot of good stuff there. Don't get me wrong, but it wasn't about service.
No.
And so, the family background I came from, my family was involved in service. And so, it really takes getting out of that self-absorption and focusing on others. And it's the most freeing thing. And we have to do it in healthy ways. It's not about denying ourselves or doing that at our own expense. We need to do our healing work so that we can actually have the cognitive emotional space to be able to focus on someone else's needs, right? So as the combination of doing our internal healing work and also getting involved in service, I think that's a very powerful combination. In fact, while I was in prison, I started a meditation group early on. They didn't want one to get started, but by hook or by crook, I ended up getting one going. And so we had this Buddhist meditation group that met twice a week. And most of the guys that came weren't Buddhists, weren't going to become Buddhists, but they were interested in meditation. And originally, early on, I remember having the thought, because some guys, they'd show up, we met on Wednesday evenings and on Saturday. On Saturday, they'd show up unless it was a nice day. It was a nice day, they'd be out in the yard, playing softball or whatever. And I remember thinking, well, my fellow prisoners, kind of a flaky bunch. And fortunately, I had enough training to immediately recognize judgmental thinking, which is not helpful. And so I think, well, maybe the way I'm presenting it, what can I do differently? So I was always curious about, how to do that. And then at one point, I connected with this woman who spent her summers in the city, Springfield, Missouri, where the prison was, and her winters were teaching at a university up in Minnesota. And she was a Catholic third order Franciscan or something, but also trained in Vipassana meditation from the Insight meditation community. I think her teacher was Joseph Goldstein. And she was kind of integrating that with contemplative Christianity, but she also had a thing where she brought Vipassana meditation to 12-step people. And, the idea of, the 11th step is maintain higher conscious contact with your higher power through prayer and meditation. Of course, they don't say much about how to do it in the literature. So, and her view was, well, Vipassana can work all 12 steps, right? Well, a little bit of hubris there, I think, but, there's something to it. But anyway, I started bringing her in, and I managed to recruit guys from the 12-step groups that I was very deeply involved in. So now I had a group of guys that were doing meditation, including myself, doing meditation and 12-step work. Then when I started the hospice program with another inmate, I recruited some of those guys into that to become hospice volunteers. So now I had a group, including myself, to do kind of participatory research with, who were doing meditation, who were in 12-step work and doing this service. And the amount of change that I started to see in myself and other people was just phenomenal. And then later on, we managed to bring this incredible program into the prison called The Event, which I'm still leading today, 23 years later. Takes people deep into their family of origin conditioning, helps you shift your relationship to it. So, of course, I recruited men into that who were, not exclusively so, but a lot of the men I recruited into that were also involved in meditation, also 12-step work, also in the hospice work. And these men not only were transforming their lives, they were becoming transformers. And many of them went on to other institutions, other facilities, and created all kinds of transformative programming. So I really saw that there's not one magic pill. It's an integration of things that reaches a tipping point for people for change and transformation. But service was a big component of it. Some kind of self-awareness training, doing the self-healing work, dealing with your own shadows and demons and so forth, and then getting involved in service. That seemed to be the ideal combination that really created significant change for people.
Yeah, it isn't. If there was a simple solution, we'd all do it. So it is, a lot of big pieces to work on all simultaneously. I want to talk about the hospice for a second. The being in direct contact with someone who's dying. First of all, but I'll just be really honest. I don't think I could do it because I don't want to catch it. I don't want to catch death. It's still, even though it's, because it's been a separate thing in our American society for sure. It's not very integrated. It's this thing that happens at the end, and it's, the body is shifted off to the side, and the funeral people take care of it, and you cry for a couple of days, and then you have to go on and be, quote, strong. And it's a little bit, it's very mysterious. Obviously I'm 68. I've had people close to me pass away, and it's been a profound experience, but I haven't really sat with people I don't know. And what was that like for you? And what did you learn in those moments? And what did they learn? And what can you describe any of what that is? Because I'm so fascinated with people that do that kind of work.
Well, up until the end of someone's life, they're still living, right? And so, it's really about living and living your life as much as you can on your own terms until you die. And that's hard to do in prison, of course. So, what and we helped these patients who became our friends, in prisons have pretty good radar with each other. So when you met a patient you were assigned to, they're going to check you out and pretty quickly figure out if they can trust you or not. And then they're just going to kind of pull you in because they're in a pretty desperate situation. They're in a maximum security prison, probably, maybe thousands of miles from their family. They're maybe they did most of their time in another prison, so they don't even have their friends from that prison, and they're up in some ward somewhere, and they're isolated, and they have no choices around their food, their diet, or anything, right? And so, or even their choice of doctor or treatment or anything. So, they're in a pretty desperate situation, and they're facing the prospect of dying in prison. So they just pull you in, and you become like really a surrogate family member, their brother, or some of my patients were much younger than I was, and some were much older, and whatever the age dynamic is, but they bring you in like a surrogate family member, and you get very close, and you do all kinds of practical things. I would bathe my patients, and if they were bedridden, clean them up and bathe them and change their sheets and do all that kind of practical attending. Get them into a wheelchair, take them out to the yard, take them to chapel, help them make a phone call to their family, help them write letters to their family. Just a lot of practical care, help feed them if they couldn't feed themselves. So all kinds of practical caregiving like that. But I thought one of the most powerful things that we brought to that relationship was the fact that we were bearing witness to their life, to their humanity, and they were not going to go through their end of their life or die unwitnessed, abandoned and unwitnessed. They were being witnessed. And I think that brings tremendous dignity to them and brings tremendous dignity to those of us involved in that kind of service. It's just a mutual thing of enhancing, recognizing our shared humanity and the sacredness of life. And it brings tremendous dignity. And I always felt it was a tremendous privilege to be able to share that part of someone's life with them. And then when a few of our patients would get released, they managed to complete their time before they died, or some managed to get through the legal system with a kind of medical release. It was very rare, but it happened on a few occasions, but most of them died there. And I was with probably half my patients when they die, because sometimes people die in the middle of the night and you're not there. Mm-hmm. Although after a number of years, we managed to get them to give us permission. Sometimes if the nurses in the unit where we were supported it, to let us stay overnight, doing a vigil with our parent. Now, that was probably 5-6 years into the program. But anyway, still, nonetheless, sometimes you don't expect it. And the next morning you find out your patient died. But being with them there at the end of life, it is profoundly, it's just the one, and especially when you're with someone when they die, 1 minute there's a being there, and the next minute they're gone, and there's just basically this lump of flesh. They're just a body. It's not animated with being anymore, right? And so that transition is incredibly profound, and it was different with every patient I had, but it always impacted me deeply. And it's really a confrontation with your own mortality, because you realize there, but for the grace of whatever you believe in or don't believe in, for that matter, there go you, right? And I had patients who were younger than I was, who were dying in prison, and this was the heights of the AIDS epidemic, and I was caring for a lot of AIDS patients as well as cancer patients and liver disease patients. And, I had been involved in IV drug usage, and I very easily could have gotten AIDS. And I hadn't been tested for it. I finally did get tested for it in prison, and thank goodness I was negative, but I didn't know. And and also I saw men who were healthy, even at this institution, and got sick and died there. In fact, we had two excellent hospice volunteers who were healthy hospice volunteers who ended up getting sick and becoming hospice patients and dying at that institution. One was a very close friend of mine, and the other one became my patient. And so, you really knew that, that sense of our own immortality that we tend to walk around with, it just really undercut that very profoundly, which is a very healthy thing in terms of our spiritual and psychological development. So it was just a profound opportunity for service in so many different ways. I'm incredibly grateful for that period of my life, and I'm really grateful to have been able to help make that opportunity available to many others, because as a result of starting National Prison Hospice Association, there's now probably 75 or 80 hospice programs in state and federal prisons all over the country.
Yeah, I've heard that is a profound experience for even some of the other prisoners that volunteer and hold funeral services for these guys.
Yeah, absolutely. There's quite famous at Angola State Prison in Louisiana. They did a film about it, and that's a place that's all lifers. It's, I don't know how many, it's like thousands of acres, and there's like 7 prisons in this huge complex with the Missouri River on one side and swamps and forests on the other side. And it's this infamous place. But at any rate, when someone dies there, they have their own horse-drawn hearse, and they do this whole funeral thing. Yeah. But my organization helped them establish a hospice program there while I was still in prison, and a film was made about it and so forth. So, we've heard from many prison administrators that once they brought a hospice program into their facility, it literally changed the culture of that facility. It impacted everyone. The feeling that at least when someone's dying, we take care of our own here. At least when someone's dying, it's maybe a completely crazy place most of the time, but when someone's dying, we bring that dignity to their life, and that uplifts everybody.
Yeah, I think I saw that movie. Somebody else told me about it. What's the name of the movie? It's a documentary.
I don't know, because there's another movie made about that place called The Farm, which is quite well known. That's about Angola.
Oh, that might have been the one I saw. There's
about the rodeo they do there and everything. But the other movie is made about the hospice program. It was funded by the Open Society Institute, but I don't remember the title of the movie.
I remember somebody telling me about the warden there.
Yeah, quite infamous.
Yeah,
I don't know if he's still the warden there or not. He must have retired by now, but yeah, he's quite a character.
Let's talk about your podcast, how people can find that, and the summits that you do, because that's really interesting to me.
We just finished a summit called the Self-Care Summit, just wrapped up yesterday, actually. And people can check that out at selfcaresummit.life, L-I-F-E. And back in March, April, we had the Global Resilience Summit, is globalresiliencesummit.org. We put on a number of summits year round. These are big online summits where we have anywhere from 30 to 70,000 people signed up. And, they go over, they're anywhere from 6 to 10 days long, and they'll have anywhere from 35 to 50 presenters spread across those days. And they're free summits, so anyone can attend. And we do make available what we call the Lifetime Access Package for people that want to, take their time to enjoy all that material and learn from it, and or to keep it and have, and that's how we monetize the summit. We're able to have the team that puts these on from gratefully the people that do purchase that upgrade. And so people can find out about that work at heartmindinstitute.co, heartmindinstitute.co, not com, but just co, Heartmind Institute. I'm sorry, we shortened it up. It's now heartmind.co, just heartmind.co. But that's my educational platform, Heartmind Institute. And I also have a lot of online courses there, including a Radical Responsibility course based on live seminars that I've done for many years on the Radical Responsibility model. And generally just my website, fleetmaul.com, is also a good place to begin. You can go to all my work through there. You'll find a way to other sites and so forth. But that's where my podcast is, the Radical Responsibility Podcast. And that's where my blog is and so forth. So that's just fleetmaul.com. If people are interested in the prison work, I started two organizations while I was in prison. One, Prison Dharma Network, which originally was about supporting Buddhist prisoners and volunteers, and it expanded to anybody interested in meditation, contemplative spirituality from different traditions. So we had people in the network who were involved in yoga, Buddhist meditation, Christian meditation, Siddha yoga, Sufi meditation, different, anything genuinely contemplative. And that organization is a thriving organization today with 4 divisions. We work with at-risk, incarcerated, and returning youth and adults. We have our flagship Path of Freedom program that before the pandemic hit, it was in 21 states and 7 countries. And so that's prisonmindfulness.org. If people are interested in that work, prisonmindfulness.org. We have another division that brings mindfulness, what we call mindfulness-based wellness resiliency to correctional officers, probation, parole officers, police, and other first responders, the whole public safety world. And that's mindfulpublicsafety.org, mindfulpublicsafety.org. And that's something I'm very involved with. I'm on a weekly basis. I'm involved in training first responders, correctional officers, and so forth in self-regulation skills and mindfulness, self-awareness skills and wellness skills and so forth. And then we have our teacher training, another division of that same nonprofit, where we train mindfulness teachers in trauma-informed approaches to bringing mindfulness, especially to individuals and populations, communities that have been put at risk, where there's a lot of trauma, under-resourced, and so forth. And that's Engage Mindfulness Institute, and that's just Engage Mindfulness, engagemindfulness.org. And so, I have these two sides of my work. I have my, on my the nonprofit side, all that work, and the other part of my life where I'm putting on summits and offer online courses. And I'm also executive coach and business consultant. And people can find all about that work through fleetmaul.com.
You're a busy man.
Yeah, it keeps me out of trouble.
Yeah.
Also,
right?
people want to learn about my book, Radical Responsibility. Yes. It has its own website, radicalresponsibilitybook.com. And there you can read what other best-selling authors have to say about the book. And you can download a free chapter right there at radicalresponsibilitybook.com.
So are there opportunities for people to volunteer, it sounds like, and possibly even create some kind of a career for themselves as being a coach themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. On the side of the prison and criminal justice work, we train people as Path of Freedom volunteers. We offer this initial part of that training as an online introductory course. I think it's an 8-week course that we offer about 3 times a year. And then people begin their path as, becoming Path of Freedom volunteers and volunteering with starting their own programs or volunteering with existing programs all around the country and internationally as well. And we can network people and let them know, if wherever they live, there's probably already a prison or jail that has some kind of program they could join in with, or we help people get programs started. And then on the other side, I'm a meditation teacher and a consultant coach and so forth. And I am moving in a direction of training coaches in a radical responsibility coaching model. And that's going to be coming in the near future, and I'll have a certification program. And then I've developed an approach to teaching mindfulness. I call it neurosomatic mindfulness. It's very much neuroscience informed, obviously, and trauma informed. It's a deeply embodied approach, which I think really accelerates the development in mindfulness awareness practices. And so I have courses in that and programs in that. And eventually I'm going to be training teachers in that as well. So I'll have some kind of certification program that I'll be offering. I hope to develop both those kind of coach certification and teacher certification programs through my own work, in the next year or two. So, but again, if people just get on our mailing list through heartmind.co, they'll be kept abreast of those things.
Well, I'm going to do that. That's definitely something I'm doing. That is amazing. I just love how people turn around something that was seemingly just the worst case scenario, prison, to what you've done. It's just it's very I don't know, I guess emotional for me to meet people that have reached inside and went, you know what, I'm gonna take this time that I have left here and make something of it.
People don't believe change is possible. The only reason I really like to share my story is because I want people to really believe that change is possible for themselves and others. In 1985, I was in a jail cell awaiting sentencing the next morning, faced with getting anywhere from 10 years to life in prison, no parole. And if I got in life in prison, no parole, I'd still be there, unless absent a presidential pardon, I'd still be there. And so, I went from, that's pretty much the bottom of the barrel there, right? And I did end up getting that 30-year no parole sentence. Fortunately, it was a lot of good time under the old law. Unfortunately, on an appeal, they knocked off one count, but still spent 14 and a half years in prison. But that's pretty much the bottom of the barrel, in our society. And today I get up in front of a group, I'll get up in front of a room with 100 police officers, all packing and in uniform. And I deliver a day of training. And, I thought up, they wonder, what the hell is this econ doing training us? And by the end of the day, we're all friends, and I really appreciate the work we did. And, I train correctional officers, probation and parole officers, and, who would think? And today I have colleagues who are prison wardens and state, directors of state departments of correction and chiefs of police. And so who would think that that's possible? Yeah. But really anything's possible when you set your mind to it.
I'm actually surprised some of these institutions want to even know about that there's another way to look at things. I'm sure a lot of these people that come out of police training in the police academy, you're blowing them away with some new concepts about how to look at some of the people they have to deal with.
Well, it's also how they work with themselves, because first responders are at high risk for all kinds of really serious negative health outcomes because of constant exposure to high stress and both secondary and primary trauma. Correctional officers who work in secure facilities, the research shows that their average life expectancy is around 59 years, 2 decades less than the general population. They're dying of all the chronic related, stress related ailments, hypertension, stroke, all the cardiovascular ailments, diabetes, obesity, and so forth, alcoholism, substance abuse, high levels of depression, anxiety, suicidality. And this is true among police as well, and even EMT, emergency personnel, and really all first responders are subjected to this, and really high levels of occupational stress injuries. And so, the field has kind of started waking up to this, and it was really the recognizing the number of suicides that were happening among correctional officers and police and other first responders, that they really have had to start dealing with it and started reaching out for help. And, we found them, they found us. So we've been working with at-risk incarcerated and returning youth and adults for 32 years now. But and we always wanted to work with the correctional officers. But I think it's been about 13, 14 years that we started to get that opportunity, and we're very involved in that work now. It's a huge part of our work, training correctional officers, probation and parole officers, police, sheriff's departments. We've worked with U.S. Border Patrol, and really helping them live and work in ways that are less damaging to them, so they can have long and healthy careers and be the public servants they are and sustain their lives in a good, healthy way. And we're not telling them how to do their jobs, but we know that a healthier CO is going to create a healthier environment for people who are incarcerated to have the opportunity to turn their lives around. So we're really happy to be able to work on kind of both sides of the system, because we know that can lead to a healthier system altogether and better outcomes.
Yeah. Wow. It's, I guess a lot of people don't think about, police officers and firefighters and the stress level and the constant, heightened firing of cortisol all day long, because you've got to be so aware of everything all the time. And there's risk. It's just constant risk. It's like being a soldier in a military situation, because that basically is what it is. And, kudos to you and that organization for doing that. That's really amazing. I mean, who doesn't want to deal with somebody that's happy and feeling good about themselves? All right, this is a side question. The name Fleet, I love that name. Is it short for something? This is just not even about what we're talking about.
Sometimes if people aren't getting, I said, like Fleetwood Mac, but no, it's just Fleet. It was my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, my mother's father.
Okay.
It was his middle name.
Okay.
And his name was Myron Fleet Wallace.
Okay.
Now, when I was young, and when you got an odd name when you're young, it's like put up your dukes. At least it was back when I went to school, So it took a while getting used to it and having to deal with it. I like it today. It's unique. But I don't know if I ever would have gotten used to Myron. That's kind of an old-fashioned name. So today I feel lucky I got Fleet, right? So, but that's where it came from. It's a family name.
Okay, I love it. That's what I wanted to end with. I just had to know where the name came from because I don't think you're the first Fleet that I've ever met, which I loved when I went. Is that like a nickname or real name? So it's a real name.
It's a real name, and I don't think there's many of us around, but I have heard of one or two out there. Not that I've ever met, but I've read about them or something. Yeah.
Okay. Hey, audience people, if your name is Fleet, send me an email. Just want to know how many are out there listening. Fleet, thank you so much for talking to me today. What a wonderful experience. See, I told you before we started how much I enjoy meeting all these interesting people doing this podcast. And again, it happened again, ladies and gentlemen. Fleet Maul. Thank you so much, Fleet. You have a beautiful day. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. You be well as well, Bob.
Much appreciation for you guys listening to The Exploding Human. Check out the website, theexplodinghuman.com, the YouTube channel, The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman, and The Exploding Human Facebook page. I want to thank Fleet Maul once again for a fabulous talk. I hope you guys check out some of the websites that we have mentioned. I'm going to put all those links in the show description so you can find Fleet Maul and all the fine work he is doing. Have a fantastic day. Bye.